Today, I want to talk to you about the Crownpeak DXM software development kits for single-page application frameworks. For Crownpeak customers for a long, long time, they have delivered applications using many different technologies, whether it be server-side, ASP, Java, PHP, or client-side applications using JavaScript, using HTML, CSS, JSON, and XML. And one of the things that our customers have been telling us is that they want to use more of the modern age in single page application frameworks, frameworks such as AngularJS, Vue.js, and React. And so, having listened to our customers, our partners, and our internal teams, we have now delivered a set of tools that sit on top of the Crownpeak DXM platform aimed at making your life as a single page application developer very, very simple. The diagram I'm showing you on screen right now is a high-level architectural diagram of how the SDKs work. Whether targeting Angular, Vue, or React, they all work in exactly the same way. What they allow you to do is to separate the content authoring experience on the left-hand side of the diagram from the content delivery and application delivery experience that is maintained by your system integrators, your partners, or your internal development staff. Using these frameworks empowers the marketer to be able to use all of the capabilities that they expect from an enterprise content management system, such as on-the-glass editing, multi-site management, language, locale creation, translation, localization, as well as drag and drop content authoring as well, freeing those content authors to be able to create tens or thousands of different pages using any structure that they choose, while allowing the developers to maintain the governance, consistency, and quality of that content inside the Crownpeak development world. And of course, all developers want to be able to use tooling that is logical to them, such as their own IDE of choice, their own continuous integration and deployment processes, their own source control providers, such as GitHub or Bitbucket. And using the SDKs allows them to maintain all of that as if they were building an application for any other platform. The SDK really does two things. First of all, it creates a connection between content that is managed inside Crownpeak DXM on the left-hand side of the diagram and the application that is being delivered to your end customer. And that's done in two ways, either by consuming content dynamically from Crownpeak DXM's Dynamic Content API, which returns JSON and optionally can return XML as well, or consuming that content statically from a JSON payload that is delivered from the Crownpeak CMS directly into your application, providing blisteringly fast, SEO optimized, governed digital experiences. The second thing that the SDKs do is they take care of all of the configuration inside the CMS. So the creation of templates, of models, of components, and fully supporting drag and drop, as we said. It automatically code generates those items based on your Angular, Vue, or React applications pages and components, cutting down development times by up to 95%. What I'm going to do next is show you the creation of a simple site. Our ProCam demonstration site, again, features some striking imagery, on-the-glass editing, drag and drop authoring capability. And we're going to build this from scratch, and we're going to choose the Crownpeak DXM React SDK, which is fully available on GitHub, open source under the MIT license. And I'm going to show you how in about 10 to 15 minutes, we can create a page with drag and drop enabled with a number of components to get you started. So let's go. So the first you can see, I'm using WebStorm here, which is an IDE of choice. And this is a starter project that I've got. Some standard folders, an assets folder to contain images, CSS, JavaScript, and the like. We have a content folder, which will hold some information relating to our routes. We have our core SDK folders, as well as an index HTML file, which is where the React application will work. And as you can see, a pretty standard Node project, calling in version 3.4.0 of the Crownpeak DXM React SDK. We use Webpack as part of this as well, just to provide web server technologies. So the first thing we need to do is we need to install all of the node packages. So we do that by running a yarn install, and that will go off and go and get all of the package content from around the web to bring our React project to life. You see now that that has done, we now can see the node modules successfully deployed inside our project. Now, as we said earlier, Webpack is what runs this application. And a couple of things to note. First of all, there's a bundle.js, which happens at runtime. Our application will create that, but we have our entry point here in index.js and a couple of values that we need to pass into our application, where to get the static content and where to get the dynamic content from. We'll also see this routes.json, and what that will do is that will help us define which pages link to which content inside the CMS. But we'll come back and we'll link that up a little bit later on. First thing we need to do is we need to go and create our environment file. And our environment file is going to contain the location of both the static and the dynamic content as well. So the next thing we're going to do is work on the index.html, and this is going to be the wrapper that surrounds all of the pages in our application. Notice the bundle.js. We're going to want to leave that where it is. We need that a little bit later on. First thing I'm going to do is go and paste in all of the content into the head blocks. So JavaScript, CSS, fonts, and anything else that I need to be called on each individual page. And then what I'm going to do is paste in the remaining markup as well. Notice there's a div with an ID of app. That is what our application is going to target. And so we'll paste that content in here, replacing that, and you'll see it start to look like a page. Note the other external scripts that we're also able to keep in place. So now that we've done our wrapper, let's go and create a page. We'll create a folder to hold it in. We'll call it pages. And inside that, we're going to create a page called homepage.js. And this is a pretty standard React class we're going to deliver right now. First thing we're going to have to do is go and define it. So this is going to be the home page, which extends CMS dynamic page. And because this inherits from React.component, we need to go and give it a constructor that inherits from props. Pretty standard React-based structure here. Into that, we're going to call super props so that it does its base class work, and then some configuration properties relating to the scaffolding. And we'll come to those a little bit later on. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to rename the route. So when you browse to /, we're going to want it to load the home page. And because we've created a class called homepage, that is the type that we are going to load. Next thing, the render method. What does this page render when it is executed? And again, I'm going to go and paste in the markup for our homepage. And I'll just show you after I'm putting the super.wrapper, so make sure that that's called. And in the return statement, we need to first of all check that the data is loaded asynchronously from the dynamic API or the static API. And if it is loaded, then the content will be pasted in. And as you'll see, if I extend that content, I've now got pretty standard HTML that I'm using, as well as a set of components, which although we haven't built yet, we will build a little bit later on. Note this drop zone as well. That's what's going to allow us to have dynamic drag and drop content. And we obviously need to include all the imports as well for those components at the top. So we'll just go back up to the top. We'll import React. We'll go and import some of the SDK content as well. And then we'll go and deliver the imports for all of the other components that we want on the top. So we'll just go and paste those in place. Okay. And now we have that page pretty much done. Next thing we're going to go and do, we're going to go and create a folder, and this we're going to store our components, and we'll create one called ProCam inside that, a functional component. Inside there, we're going to put our drop zones, and that drop zone, I'm just going to paste the standard drop zone code that we've got, and I'll talk you through this a little bit as we go. Notice it calls in all of the other components that we are saying are drag and droppable inside the platform, and this inherits from CMS drop zone component, which is a fairly generic type that we've created to handle your drag and drop. Now we want to go ahead and create our component. So inside here, we're going to create that directory called ProCam. That's just how we're going to organize them, totally optional. Inside that, we're going to create a component called Home Hero. And that's really going to be the first item that we are going to build onto the page. Again, we have to define its type. So we have to import both React and the SDK types that we're going to use. And this is going to be of type Home Hero. And you notice here it extends CMS component. Again, CMS component extending from react.component. If I go and get some more content to paste into here, a couple of things that we're going to note first of all, because it is inherits that, we have to call the constructor that has to call its base class and has to do a super on props. And then if I go and start building out the render method, you notice here we're just returning a standard BISA presentation component really, but there are these fields that we have to deal with, the title, the text, the image, the alt text. And so what we need to do is tell DXM that these are going to be fields that are managed inside the CMS. And the way that we do that, let's do the first one, the desktop banner image. We tell that it is of type new CMS field, and we'll give it a name. Let's just call it the desktop banner image, and then what we have to do is give it a type, and we support lots of different types: text, image, WYSIWYG, but this one is going to be of type image. So we'll know that it will give us a drag and drop image picker inside the CMS. And then finally what we have to do is tell it where to get its data from when it's loading into the app. We pass the data around inside props.data, so we're saying if this thing has props and props.data, then the value is going to be the desktop banner image item inside that. And if that's not the case, then what we're going to do is we're just going to return null so that we don't get null reference exceptions inside the application. So once that's done, the next thing to do is just do that for all of the other fields. I'm just going to paste that into the experience here so that you can see that running. Get hold of those and we'll just go and paste those in. So now we've added all of the other fields, the desktop and mobile banner images, the text, the image, the alt text, and everything else that we need for this experience. And so now we have our application. I'm just going to run it. So bear in mind, we've done nothing in the CMS yet, but it's not going to run at the moment because I've not created these image panel events, products, and two blue panel components. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time commenting those out so that we only have the home hero running. So I have to remove them from the imports. I have to remove them from the home page, .js that we created, the CMS page. And I also have to remove them from the drop zone. So let me just go and do that right now. Okay, and now I've got that done. Let's start our application with a yarn start. That will spin up Webpack with the React application. Click on the link, and with any luck in a browser, there we go. We see the page that we've created so far. Notice the fields have no content in them. That's because we haven't published them through the CMS as of yet. Okay, so now let's start thinking about creating some content in the CMS, and this is the scaffolding portion. So notice here I have a folder called Scratch. There's no content in that whatsoever. So we're going to use the scaffolding process to create that project site route and all the configuration for me. First thing we need to do, in our environment file, we need to add some more details. We need to add the CMS username, the CMS password, as well as the access API key that we are going to use. So in this case, I'll copy in my instance name. Sales Engineering is the Crownpeak CMS instance name I want to use. Obviously, your own username, your own password, and your own API key are going to be pasted into the experience as well. So I'll just put those in here, and I will go and populate those before we run any operations against the DXM platform. So now all I've got that information inside my environment file, I just need to run a yarn Crownpeak init, which initializes our project. I have to give it the parent ID of the folder that I want that content to go in. So just flicking back to the CMS, I can go and see that the asset ID of my Scratch folder is here on screen. So I copy that to my clipboard and I paste that onto my command line. And the next thing is to give the site route a name. In this case, we're just going to call it Procam React, and we hit go, and that's going to run against the Access API, and it's going to create a project for me, and with any luck it will return us the identifier of the project and the site route that we're going to need in order to add back to our environment file for future operations. Okay, and so what we do, we'll just paste those in Notepad, and then you can go and put those into your environment file that we'll need when we start scaffolding in a second. Just paste the site route and the project ID, and there we have it. So the next thing we need to do is run a patch, and this installs some of the stuff we need for the SDKs inside the component project that we've just created. I've sped this up a little bit just so that we can not watch this ticking over. The next thing is to verify that the scaffolding operation has successfully created. As we can see, that is all happy. And so the next thing we do is actually apply this configuration against the CMS. Running a dry run of the scaffolding process shows us that it's going to create the components, the pages, and the wrappers that we have built, as well as uploading those assets. So now that we know that it's going to work, let's run the scaffolding process for real. Now we'll run the process. We'll see it's creating components, it's creating wrappers, pages, templates. And again, we've sped that up, but we now have the configuration inside DXM. Looking back into the CMS, we can now see that the project contains all of the assets, the site route, and various information that we uploaded. We don't actually need the site config folder. We're just going to get rid of that. That was just created by the component library. But if we look in the component definitions, we'll see the home hero component that we created. And if we open that up in form view, then we'll be able to see its pattern clearly defined. And here's the pattern. As you can see, it's the HTML that we had inside our render method, now decorated with component library specific language ready to go. The template definitions, the home page that we created is now there as well, and that will allow us very simply to go and start creating content inside the CMS. So if we come back up to the root of the site, we can go and create a new file. Let's call that the home page. Let's go and select the homepage template that we want to use. Here we go. Now, when we open the homepage, we'll be able to see its content in preview. And there we go. That's our preview. And as you can see, there's no content in there. But if we flip across to form mode, we can now start populating that data in our form fields. And as you can see here, I've now populated those form fields with all of the information that we need and we want to display. And as I switch into save that and switch into preview mode, then we're going to get that page rendered correctly for us. There we go. Now we have a piece of content that exists showing all of that content we added. And of course, on the glass editing capability we get out of the box, as well as the ability to drag and drop content into this drop zone that you see at the bottom of the page. But we haven't yet built any components that are draggable. For now, let's just publish that content out to dev, and we'll go and look at that in the API shortly. Okay, so now that we're published, we can jump across. First thing to do is go and get the asset ID for the page that we've created. So there it is. And what we're going to do, first of all, is stick that on the end of our dynamic content API query so that we can go and look at the JSON that's being returned by the Crownpeak DXM dynamic content API. Here we go. We'll just click that to format it a little bit nicer. As you can see, these are the fields that I've got coming back by default. Clearly, there's a lot of information. I would narrow that down in real life, and the SDKs use a lot less. But we now have to add that into our routes.json to say that when we're requesting the homepage at /, we're actually requesting that ID itself. And as we can see, our web server is already running. Our Webpack server is already running. And so simply browsing now to the homepage returns me that content that is published from the dynamic content API. Okay, so now that we've got that page running, let's go and create a couple more components and show you how drag and drop works. We're going to create two components. The first thing we're going to create is a product component. And the product component is going to have an array of product items inside it. So inside our product.js, first thing we're going to go and do is paste all of the imports that we need, as well as defining the class shape. So here we have products that inherits or extends CMS component. It has a title as well as an array of products. And then the render method uses some pretty standard React-based stuff to iterate through a map. It also has a comment above it called the list that enables CP list inside the CMS, which is what tells us we have multiple items. Now, product item is the next piece that we want, and I'm going to paste the code in here as well. This is an individual product item, very similar to the home hero. It has, a title, an image, link, and all of that content as well. So pretty standard piece here. Now, I'm going to scaffold that in the CMS, but because we've already done all of the initialization, we don't need to do that this time. Now we just need to tell it to go and scaffold up the products component, as well as the product item component. Now, this is the class name that it's going to look for, and that tells the scaffolding process to only work against those two individual components that we've created. So that's now running. As we can see, we're done. And again, I've sped that up. And now as we come into here, we just need to enable the products component inside the drop zone. So I'm just going to put that at the top and uncomment that item, as well as adding it into the list of components that can be draggable inside the platform. So that's done. Now back into the CMS. And if we go and look inside the component definitions, what we're going to see is that we now have our two new components that have been created very, very simply. So now I can go back into the home page, open it in inline edit mode. And in order to use the draggable blocks, I need to open my content blocks panel, go to the advanced tab. And as you can see, I now have this empty drop zone down the right-hand side. Now, once my product item is available to me, I can drag that into the experience. There, my content is now available, and I can edit that content inline. I can paste in the text that I want, and now because I want to add items in a repeating panel, I need to move into the form view, and I can complete that content manually. I've now completed those fields, and I've added 4 product items by selecting from images around the CMS and entering the text. I have saved that asset. I'm just going to publish it through workflow now, and then as we preview that page, what we're going to see is the content that we had before, and as we scroll down, here is now my content block. I can switch into inline edit mode. I can edit on the glass, either product items or the title or anything else that we configured, and I could also drag panels up and down, reorder them, or drag other content components that I'd created as I choose. As we can see, the workflow process is still happening. That content is getting published right now. And as soon as that is published, then we're going to be able to go back across to our React application and see the changes there. Okay, so back in the browser, we can now go and look at the dynamic content API, and if we refresh that, we'll now see the product data available as JSON as well. And so as we refresh that product page, now we have the content that we entered via the CMS with our products panel below. We talked earlier about the SDKs being able to support both dynamic and static content. The CMS publishes not only to the dynamic content API, but can also publish to disk. So here we see a JSON file. The asset ID is the name of this file, and I'm just going to make a change. This is local on the file system published by the CMS. And if I go into the home page and I change the base class that this is inheriting from CMS static page or from dynamic page into static page, what now happens when I refresh this content is I have content that is delivered statically. So this is now serving that content from my local file system. And switching between the two is as simple as changing the class type and refreshing the page, and now we see dynamic content being loaded. And I think you'll agree that's pretty simple. A few things to leave you with. First of all, the links to our SDK repositories available up on GitHub for both React, Vue.js as well as Angular, and an example site that contains implementation examples for each of these. Included in that is the ProCam site that we have built today with all of the missing components that we left out. On top of that, we have also recently released a Gatsby source plugin. So if you are a React developer and you take advantage of using Gatsby, then you can use the source plugin to both enumerate and build pages both at develop and at build time through your Gatsby source world as well. Again, thank you for your time today, and I look forward to any questions that you may have.